Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Better Than I Found It podcast. This is episode 8. This is Mikkel. I'm back here and sitting down with Coach McGraw per usual. Coach, how's it going today?
It's really good. Monday morning, ready for a big week here in Waco.
Yeah. U.S. Open week. You have any thoughts on Winged Foot and U.S. Open?
Well, my first thoughts are Winged Foot's going to win. They've got a lot of rough up there. So, when I was 14 years old, I watched Hale Irwin shoot 7 over par to win the U.S. Open. And I'll never forget seeing some of the best players in the world shoot 80 that week. So I think Winged Foot's all you want. It's a great championship golf course. When they add rough to it, and it's lush right now, it's a real challenge. So, but the best players in the world are probably going to find their way to the top, as they do often.
Okay, I'll give you one pick then. Who's your pick to hoist the trophy this week?
Well, why wouldn't I pick Charles Howell? He's our guest today.
All right, perfect. I love it.
I think Charles is a great guest. I mean, no, actually, Charles, I don't know if he would want me to pick him or not. Too much pressure, maybe not enough. Who knows? But DJ, who's a pretty good pick, he's played great on hard golf courses and easy golf courses recently. He'd be a pretty good pick. How about you?
I think he's the obvious one. I'll give you 2 then, Charles Howell and DJ.
Thank you.
I have to go with my fellow countryman, Viktor Hovland. He's not just a completely obvious one, but I love his driving of the golf ball, and I think he's built for major championship golf. So we'll pick those 3. Coach, Baylor Golf, we've had our first qualifier. What can you share about what happened in that qualifier?
Well, we've had a qualifying to earn 1 spot so far. So our returning first-team All-American, Cooper Dossie, took nothing for granted. He went out there and shot 63 the first round, which at Cottonwood Creek is 9 under par. And then he shot 66 at Ridgewood and a final round 62 at Ridgewood. 191 for 3 rounds is it's the lowest we've had since I've been at Baylor. So I want to congratulate Cooper on earning that spot for our first tournament, which we'll leave in a couple of weeks, but he's definitely going to be on the van. That's amazing golf for 3 rounds.
Yep, incredible golf. And Ridgewood is scoreable for sure. Cottonwood is somewhat scoreable, but 191 is incredible. And so that's from your time at Baylor. If any Baylor listeners, any former players are listening, if you know of anybody who's broken 191, please let Coach McGraw know as soon as possible.
Please. I want that guy back on the team, whoever he is.
Yeah, we'll do whatever we can to get you back on the team. No, amazing playing by Cooper. Coach, you mentioned this briefly in the last episode. Your book is available again. Everybody, you can find it on Amazon. It's called Better Than I Found It. You can also find it on www.betterthanifoundit.com. So go check that out. In your book, Coach, you have mentioned a few things about our guest today, Charles Howell III. What can you say about your time with Charles and coaching him in Stillwater?
Well, I think, and Charles will tell you a little bit today in the recording, he's got a great relationship with both myself and Coach Holder, Mike Holder, who was the head coach at the time at OSU. But Charles and I just have a very good relationship. Several times a year, we text and talk about his game. And I'm not his teacher. I'm not his sports psychologist. I do none of that. But I think he enjoys listening to my perspective. And I certainly enjoy listening to his perspective. And I think the listeners today are going to be amazed. He's actually teaching people things today when he talks. It's really, really good. And I learned a few new things today from Charles. So I have a good relationship with him. It's lasted for 23 years. I'm hoping for quite a lot longer.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. I learned several things. And I think that's why we started this, right, is to create some insight. Obviously, some fun stories, some interesting people and get their perspectives, but it's all about kind of creating insight every time. And Charles Howell did not hold back. So that was fantastic. I learned several things just in that conversation. And going off of Charles Howell before we cut to the conversation, he slots into a ranking we're going to do. This is a segment that we're going to start over the next 5 weeks. You and I have been talking a little bit about this back and forth, Coach. I'm actually really interested to start this segment because I'm going to get to hear the top 5 rounds that you have witnessed in college golf through your time. And so you've seen a lot of good golf at a lot of great golf courses in tough conditions and whatnot. And so you have come up with your ranking of the top 5 rounds that you have seen. And Charles Howell slots in at the number 5 spot this week.
Yes, it is. Charles was playing one of the great seasons in the history, spring seasons in the history of college golf in 2000. And we were kind of marching right through that spring, playing great. And we got to the NCAA championship with some pretty high expectations. And Charles himself had some high expectations. He felt like his 5th place finish the year before at Hazeltine probably wasn't how he wanted to end his college career. And he'd love to figure out a way to win the championship individually and certainly as a team. So Charles opened the tournament, actually bogeyed the first 2 holes of the first round and ended up shooting 5 under, shot a beautiful 67 that day. The next day he lowered that with a 66, took the lead in the tournament. And the 3rd round, I'm bouncing back and forth from player to player. Mike Holder is walking with Charles that round. So he's seeing every shot. I didn't see every shot that day, but I saw enough of it to realize he hit a 1-iron from 265 yards to an area smaller than a living room on the 7th hole. It was unbelievable. Made eagle there. 1-iron? I mean, people use a 1-iron to butter their bread nowadays. He hit that about 12 feet in a spot you couldn't hit a sand wedge to, and eagled that hole. And to go in later in the round, and I'm standing on the 18th green with J.C. De Leon, and we're looking through the trees over to the 16th tee. And we can see Charles standing there with Mike Holder, and there's a weight. It's a par 4 little 5-iron sand wedge hole, or you can try to drive the green. And the other 2 players in the group hit 5-iron and started walking on it forward. And Charles waited, and he waited. And after the green cleared, he pulled off the head cover, and the gallery, where there were about 25 people watching the group, the gallery, you could hear them go, whoa, whoa, like, he's going to try to drive this green. And they didn't know it, but he had driven the green the first 2 rounds and made an eagle and a birdie already that week. So he just knocked that driver right in the middle of the green, made an eagle, and went on to shoot 63 that day. And a couple things strike me about that round. One, we were literally, we were standing on Charles Howell's shoulders that week. I mean, he just was leading us in every way possible and had done so the entire spring. And number 2, it was the low round of the week. And number 3, it catapulted him and us to a team title that week. And I think back on it, and I think to how much that title meant to Charles as an individual. But certainly he came to Oklahoma State to win a national championship, and he was able to do it that week. But I have that visual image of that 1-iron on early in the round for an eagle, and then that driver in the middle of the green. 2 eagles, 9 under par, 63. And by the way, he shot 69 the final round. And I write about that final round in my book, Better Than I Found It. So you'll have to go to get the book to hear all of that.
Exactly.
But I will say this. He broke Phil Mickelson's record, his NCAA championship record, by 6 shots. And he won the tournament by 8. In my opinion, this was a masterpiece in the history of the NCAA championship as far as an individual goes. So that 63 comes in as number 5 on my list of the 5 best rounds I've ever seen.
Wow. I love it. But where are we going to go from here? There's four even better performances. So
yeah, you just wait. You'll have to wait.
All right. Well, perfect. Well, I think the conversation with Charles Howell definitely makes my top 5 list already. It was awesome. I learned some really cool things. He's a great guy. Got to chat with him a little bit, and all I've heard from you about him and whatnot. He's just a fantastic guy, very open and honest, shares some beautiful insight. So enough back and forth here. Let's cut to the conversation with Charles Howell.
All right, Charles Howell, thank you for coming on the Better Than I Found It podcast today. I really do appreciate you being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's our history and time goes way back from, holy cow, even the 90s, we're going to say here, which that just shows you how old we are. But yeah, man, I appreciate this time.
Well, you bet, Charles, and I do thank you for that. But one of the 90s, you were young in the 90s. I was already middle aged, so I'm definitely getting up there. But I just want to talk a little bit and just kind of, even though I know this history, I know a lot of people don't, but you grew up in Augusta, Georgia. So that's kind of an iconic place for a golfer to grow up. But you weren't always a golfer when you were young. What got you interested in the game?
So, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Growing up in Augusta, it's probably the one place in the world where it's the easiest to be a golfer, in that golf was a cool sport because of the Masters. Now, as a kid, I had zero appreciation for what the tournament was, what the tournament meant, how big it was, and all that. But we knew golf was cool. And so as a kid, when I was 7 years old, started playing the game. And once a year, every April, we had this thing called the Masters come around. And it was this huge incentive to keep practicing, to keep staying involved in the game, and even learn the players and learn the game. So I'd say of any places that I could have grown up or been, the Augusta was for sure the easiest place for a kid to play golf.
Well, so you started about age 7, but something very significant in the history of the Masters happened that year. Tell me about that, because I know it inspired you.
Yes. So let's start 1986 then, for example. Obviously you've got, how do you say it's one of the best Masters, right? Because every time you find the best one, there's another one. But Jack Nicklaus winning there, what he did at his age, I now appreciate that a whole lot more now than I did at the time. Especially now being 41 and what he was able to do. But I'd say 87 was the big one. You have a guy from Augusta, Georgia win the tournament. Here's Larry Mize taking down, obviously just the greats of the game at the time. And obviously Greg Norman, I don't know if there was a bigger one at the time. And I attended that Masters, but in a sad way, I remember thinking, a guy from Augusta just won the Masters. This may not be that hard to do. So in a weird way, it might've been the worst thing that could have happened. As a 7-year-old, I saw a guy from Augusta win and thought, well, that's just commonplace. It probably happens often. But when I look back on, what an easy way and what a big way to start the game of golf. It's, the Masters was in my backyard, so to speak. And you got these legends of the game coming there, and I get to watch them play. Looking back on it, I think it was a huge advantage on how to start.
Yeah, it really was. And to have a homegrown Augusta native win, it's still the only Augusta native to have won the tournament, I believe.
Yes, it is. Correct. So hopefully we can find another way to get on there.
Well, how about CH3, huh?
Exactly.
Okay.
In November. How about that? So
I think
November
that's
Masters.
amazing. I think it's going to be unbelievable. But so you got to watch the Masters, but you didn't play in the golf course Augusta National until about what age? How old were you?
So I was 10 the first time I played there, and growing up right across the fence. So for anybody that's watched the Masters, the 12th green and 13th tee box, literally right behind that is the 9th hole of Augusta Country Club. And so as kids, we would always sort of peer through the fence, and if we'd have been a little more brave, we'd have snuck down there and hit some putts and chips on that 12th green.
Charles, admit it,
yes.
You did.
Well, okay. There were a couple of times, but we would have done it more. And so growing up there, I was fortunate to know a few members of Augusta National that I guess they felt sorry for this 10-year-old kid, and they took me out to play. And that was my first experience out there. And every single time I've been out there, every single time I've played it, and it's just the place is just special. It just is. And it never gets old. It never gets boring. I feel like I even still to this day learn something new about the place every time I go out there.
That's great. What was your score that day at 10 years of age?
Okay, so I shot 79, but
Wow.
I need to asterisk it a little bit. We played well forward tees, so this was nowhere near whatever. So I played let's say a tee that was comparable for how far I hit it at the time.
That's good. That's a good first round, good first go round there. So obviously the Masters and Larry Mize winning and all of it was attached to that kind of got you motivated to play. And so you became kind of an avid junior golfer and you started competing around the country. It wasn't but about 7 or 8 years later, probably 8 years later, you were the number one ranked junior player in the country.
Yes. So, so much of my success and all that goes to my parents and for the sacrifice that they made. And for all the golf parents out there, you get it, where your life and definitely your free time life becomes traveling around the country with your kids playing golf. And not only that, but, the amount of times we drove in the car on the weekends from Augusta down to Orlando, Florida, for me to get golf lessons at the time from David Ledbetter. And so, there's, so many people that are involved in this and so many people that sacrifice. And for all as I said, the junior golf parents, they get it. And so we spent the better part of, those 8-9 years traveling the country playing junior golf. And, was fortunate to get to the number one ranked junior, but the memories and the experiences of that, I don't think you quite appreciate them until later, how fun junior golf really was.
Yeah. And especially when you got to have your parents along for a lot of that, which was great. And, that summer of 96 was the first time I ever saw you. I actually saw you came to Oklahoma to play at Oak Tree in a junior tournament. All the best junior players in the country came out there. And I walked around with Mike Holder that day as he was recruiting you. I kind of already thought I might want to be his assistant coach one day if he ever wanted an assistant coach.
Yeah.
Bruce Hepler had left a year earlier and gone to Georgia Tech. So anyway, I saw you there, and I thought that was a really good experience to see you play. But you had quite a summer there. Tell me about the summer of 96. USAM.
Yeah, so 96, it kind of the college recruiting, first off, was a really big eye opener in that, and now even I can't imagine how much bigger and grander the scale has become. But with schools like the University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, Oklahoma State, UNLV, University of Florida, like so many great schools, and it came to, holy cow, I can pick one of these schools to go to, and like that was the kind of the first time I'd really felt overwhelmed, maybe, because up until then your parents deflect so much from you, you don't appreciate it and don't know it. And the fact that there's Mike Holder involved, who is a legend of his own right, and just the whole experience. And in 96, the one golf tournament I wanted to win more than any was the U.S. Junior, and that I lost the finals of that U.S. Junior to Shane McMenemy. I believe he went to Arizona State, maybe.
He did.
And golly, like I remember losing that, and I remember just thinking like my world had ended. And I think I just thought I was just devastated. I remember crying after I'd lost that. It was just it was just the one big event, right? It was a USGA. It was played on great golf courses, and the history to it. And then to follow that up, I got in the boxing ring later that year at Pumpkin Ridge with this guy named Tiger Woods. And I think the one memory scarred in my brain to this day of that was, Tiger wasn't that big back then. And he played, what was it, a 43-inch Cobra driver with a steel shaft. I think that time it was Tour Bellata golf balls. I don't quite think I didn't think the professional had come out. And he was flying this thing at least 310. And I had never seen a ball launch so high and go so far. And so anyway, he beat me on the 17th hole. And I remember once again, I was just devastated. Like here I was thinking I should have beat Tiger Woods. Now as time in history would go, I really only beat him once or twice since, but but I mean, looking back on the summer, it was one of my best summers ever. The sad thing on the way life works is you don't appreciate it until many years later. But then that led me right into Oklahoma State and Stillwater, which was awesome.
Well, thank you for sharing those stories about that summer of '96. I remember watching that and hoping that one day I'd be a college golf coach. And then that November, you signed a letter of intent with Oklahoma State, and that next June 1st, Mike Holder hired me as his assistant. So I got to Stillwater 2 months before you did.
Yes.
And was waiting with a lot of anticipation because your roommate, Boyd Summerhays, had also been the #1 ranked junior player in the country a year before. So I thought
correct.
This was going to be quite an experience. And Bo Van Pelt, he was no bad player. And Edward Lohr would end up being a 4-time All. We had a great team there your first year at Oklahoma State.
Well, we did have a great team. And obviously, I know you remember this well. I got to Oklahoma State, and I think those 4 walls of that dorm closed in faster than anything I had seen before. And I was homesick as could be. And there was a moment in time where I thought, my goodness, what have I done? I want to transfer. I want to go back home. And I remember my dad saying, nope, you gave your word, you're staying. And I think if it wasn't for Boyd Summerhays and yourself and Coach Holder, I would have been gone. But the first month, you guys babysat me, and I know you know it, a ton to keep me in school out there. And man, am I glad you did, because it was 3 awesome years.
Well, I think that's one of the things that's underrated. The first time a kid goes away on his own is that there's a real potential. It doesn't matter how good a player you are. You could be the best player in the country as you were, or you could be an average player. And if homesickness occurs, it's going to affect everything that you got going on. So it definitely affected your golf. And I'll give Boyd high marks because he kept you moving forward that fall. It was amazing what he did. And Coach Holder, obviously, it's funny. We could talk about Coach Holder a lot here, but he actually developed an affection for you that you may or may not have ever known was there, but he really thought you were special. And
well, obviously I owe so much of my success to yourself and to Coach Holder, and you know this, and even deal with this to this day, is, you really don't know how good a kid is. And the jump from junior golf to college golf is massive, because it really is the first time that the player is on their own. For example, one thing I learned really quick in Stillwater was laundry doesn't pick itself up and clean itself. Breakfast doesn't cook itself in the morning.
No, it doesn't.
So there's all these other responsibilities on top of playing golf that you have to deal with, and you have to manage your school, you have to manage your fitness, etc. So yeah, the job of a college golf coach is so much more than just the golf part, that I had no appreciation for until I got to Stillwater.
Well, it's good that you say that. A lot of people don't really understand that, and it's important, and probably you couldn't understand it until you actually see it in person. But I have about 3 images of that first semester, other than the fact you were homesick. So I'm going to jump in a couple of stories. So one day, Coach Holder and I were walking down to the practice tee, and you were there by yourself hitting balls. And I don't think there's ever been a guy that practiced the way you did. It was like you couldn't wait to get to the practice tee. It was just, I think you're that way today. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So we walked down to the tee, and Mike Holder had on his wraparound Oakley sunglasses. So you can't see his eyes. Terminator. And you're hitting balls. And this is one of the first practice sessions. And you were working on something, and you weren't hitting it all that well. And so Coach Holder hadn't said anything, and you hadn't said anything. Do you remember this conversation?
Oh, I remember it. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll let you finish it then. After about 3.5 minutes, what seemed like a 30-minute period, you turned around and said, Coach Holder, what do you think? Then what happened?
Well, Yes, I can remember the day. I said, Coach Holder, what do you think? And he said, well, I think that I thought I recruited a Ferrari and I got a Ford Pinto. And clearly now, many years later, that image and that conversation is stuck in my head. Oh yeah, I remember the day. Do I ever? That's a line that a few lines really stick with you, Coach McGraw. That's one of them.
Oh my goodness. And I was stunned. You were stunned. Mike Holder walked away and you and I just said, welcome to Stillwater, Charles.
Yeah. Welcome. How's everything going?
How's everything going? You know, another day, we were just watching you practice one day and he said, Charles, do you have a girlfriend? Do you bring a girlfriend to college? And you said, no, sir, but I have 14. And you pointed at your golf bag. And I've never seen him smile like that. It was like, oh my God, I got the right guy.
Exactly.
He's in love with these golf clubs. This is the guy. And then a third image I have, or third story that kind of sticks out is one day Coach Holder asked me to go over to you guys' apartment for some reason. And up on the wall, you had two posters. And one was Tupac and the other was Ben Hogan's 1-iron. And I thought,
yeah,
could there be any more opposite images? And Tupac was doing something a little bit X-rated on there. He was not for public consumption. But anyway, can you explain that, Charles? Tupac and Ben Hogan?
Actually, you know what, Coach McGraw, there's some things you look back in history and you just can't explain them. And I think that's probably one of them. I told you I went through a couple dark times out there with some homesickness and those walls crashing in.
Yeah.
I wish I would have looked at that Ben Hogan 1-iron picture more, though. I can tell you that over my last 20 years of golf here, maybe I should have studied that one a little better.
That's all right. Tupac, he was a hero of a lot of kids in the mid-'90s, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So we could talk about your entire career, but it was very, very good at Oklahoma State. You were a 3-time All-American. I think your sophomore year, you finished 5th at Nationals up at Hazeltine. And
yes,
so you were progressing. You'd won the preview that year, having a good career, really playing well. And you came back for that third year and played nice in the fall. And then in the spring, you went on an absolute tear. And about 2 or 3 times through the years, when you and I have talked by text message or on the phone, you've said, hey, describe spring of 2000 for me again.
Yeah.
In other words, it was like, I think about 10 guys in the world were playing better than you at the time. Tiger, Ernie, maybe a few others. Describe that spring where you were.
Well, it's something that I've thought about quite often, actually. I mean, okay, first off, for the life of me, I wish I knew a lot more about how I did what I did. I remember, though, that over the 2.5 years that led up to that, around yourself and Coach Holder, everything was built and focused around playing and competing. And where there was a lot of times when you guys had us qualify when we probably didn't, quote, need to qualify, but I think the focus was to get us on the golf course, get us playing, et cetera. And so, there were times throughout there when I would struggle, and I remember Coach Holder would say, well, you just need to go figure it out and keep playing. And for whatever reason that spring, it all just kind of figured out. Like there wasn't one magic potion one day. I'd say the most vivid thing I remember, which is so unlike my personality and my character, is we were in Stillwater before the national championship. And, Coach Holder you guys had to stay out there. And I remember we're on the range at Karsten, practicing and hitting balls. And I remember taking a towel out and just sitting the towel on the ground and watching guys practice. I didn't really feel the need to practice. Like I knew I was playing well and I knew I was doing a lot of things well. And I just felt really, really calm and really, really at ease with things and with my golf game. And I honestly say, I don't know that I've felt really that way since then. I don't, it's kind of hard to recreate. Okay, let's all of a sudden feel calm. And then you worry about, well, am I feeling calm enough? And it was just, and maybe it was a culmination of being 3 years around yourself and Coach Holder and what that finally had done and the way you guys had structured out our practice and our work. But man, it's something I've thought about often. It's why I've bugged you in the past multiple times on it. I wish I could do it one more time.
Well, I think you will. And I'm going to talk about that more in a little bit. But I have a couple other memories too. One, you never shot 80 at Karsten Creek in 3 years. And in all the weather we played in, quite frankly, that's an amazing accomplishment. Never shot 80 one time. You remember that?
Yep, I do remember that.
Okay. But early in your career, you could not break 70 for the life of you. And Coach Holder had the greatest time. He'd be on 17T. Any round, he made sure he was there on 17T to get in your ear. Yeah. And he talked you out of breaking 70 3 or 4 times. You remember that?
100%. Now, let's all remember, too, the 17th tee shot there is brutal. And if and when Coach Holder redesigns it, those trees on the left should go. You can't have trees and water. Let's pick one or the other. A bunch of you
alums would have had chainsaws and taken them out already.
Oh my gosh, it's coming. So let's first of all talk about Coach Holder's design flaw of the 17th hole.
Okay, here we go.
Then first off, the tee shot. Second off, that green is not built for the club going in there at all. So Coach Holder has a green there that's designed for a wedge, maybe a 9-iron, that some days, and you saw this, we're hitting 3 and 4-iron into it.
Yes.
So no, back to reality. Yes, he talked me out of busting 70 there so many times. I'd say a huge part of my success, especially early in my career, was the function of Karsten Creek. I mean, is there a golf course where every tee shot scares you? The green complexes are arguably too severe. He loved getting the greens really fast. Apart from having actual Bermuda grass to learn how to chip off of, which is, I think, the one thing we missed there a little bit. Yeah. I think Karsten was a huge part of my success, just learning how to manage a golf course that difficult.
Well, yeah, I always believed that too. And a lot of people thought it was so hard that it just made it hard to even get confidence. But if you could figure it out there, you could probably figure it out just about anywhere. And
totally agree.
I told the story about him trying to talk you out of that 70. I remember you talking to your dad one time. He says, yeah, I'm so mad at Coach Holder. Best score I've shot 70. And he gets in my ear every time on 17. He said, son, you better figure that out.
Exactly.
He's trying to help you. And your dad was smart that way, I thought.
Oh, yeah. Well, you remember all the qualifying rounds. Coach Holder would kick a ball out of the fairway into the rough. Yep. He'd do all kinds of stuff just to upset us. And once we figured out that it was done for our benefit, his ways and tactics were actually quite smart. It took a little patience at times, though.
I did. There's no question. I remember another thing he did with you that I loved. You'd be 145 yards and he'd make you, in qualifying, make you hit a 6-iron. And you're going, whoa. This is a 9-iron or wedge. And he'd make you hit a 6-iron. He was trying to get you to gear down on your iron shots. And I think he gave you a lot of help, especially with your short irons, I felt like.
Tremendous. And you remember, too, that was also kind of around the same time that Tiger was struggling with his short irons. Mm-hmm. And that, granted, we're talking about a guy that won the Masters in '97, but remember, his short irons at the time weren't great. Right. So there was a bit of a theme in golf there. I remember you would also go out and draw the rings around our practice greens, yep. And we would have to hit multiple clubs the same distance. That's some of the practice I still do today that I learned from being there.
That's good. Well, that was an amazing time, and I want to culminate this talk about Oklahoma State and your time there with what I consider to be the masterpiece in the history of the NCAA championship as far as an individual performance. Just give me something on that week. That was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, we'd gotten there, and I'm sure you remember we got there a couple days early and went and played the practice round. In the golf course, there's holes out there in situations that are pretty visually intimidating, but there was also holes where if you drove it well, you could really take advantage of it. And for whatever reason, the team got along really well that week. Coach Holder, for however he was throughout the year, he always told us the week of the national championship that nothing would bother him or really affect him. And we all just got along well that week. The golf course fit my eye. A couple of the risk reward holes, I played well. Drivable par 4 there on the back 9 and the par 5s. And I look back at that leaderboard sometimes at some of the guys that were up there that are still playing the tour to this day. And I didn't appreciate how good of a quality of field we had in college golf then. I know a lot of studs have come out since then, but that group of players we had even that week was pretty special.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, they're going to have to go a long, long way before they find an individual performance as good as that one. I still consider it one of my greatest memories.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it was great. So shortly thereafter, you turned pro. I think you played in a couple of Korn Ferry events and finished top 5 in a couple in a row. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we started off there, played the one at Greensboro, actually at Sedgefield, where we play now. I finished second to Kent Jones.
Wow.
Yes, I lost to him that week, I remember, and turned pro shortly thereafter, started at the Greater Hartford Open. Cromwell, Connecticut was my first event as a pro. And now here we are, 20 years later, and it's been an absolute whirlwind of emotions and stories and chasing golf balls.
Yeah, you've done a lot of that. And I'm just going to give some statistics. So you've won 3 times on the PGA Tour. 16 times you've finished second, runner-up. 2 times you were a President Cup member for the United States team. You've won $40 million in prize money. You've made 442 out of 572 cuts, and you had 96 top 10 finishes. So yeah. I've got to believe, other than a very select few like Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson, just a few golfers would come out of college and say, well, I think I can do better than that. But most people would trade your career the day they turn pro every single time. Do you agree with that?
Well, thank you. I agree with it. The one thing on there is the lopsidedness of 16 second place finishes and 3 wins. And that's one thing. I mean, it does bother me. It keeps me up at night at times thinking about it. And I'd say if like a really honest look and evaluation of it, there's been times where, and I'm not alone in this because everybody wants it really bad, but I think I want to win tournaments so bad that I make it bigger and harder than it should be. And the difficulty of winning a PGA Tour event is built in from the time you tee off. It doesn't need to be made any more difficult by the player. And same is true where I found myself trying to do something more than I needed to do on the back 9 on a Sunday, where maybe trying a shot that I shouldn't or wouldn't normally try. So trying to do something out of like my realm to do something special to win. And, those are things I'm aware of and doing a better job of. But yeah, besides that, in fact, right there, I'd be more than happy to take that career had I got a chance to do it all over again, for sure.
Okay, well, and I wasn't saying to be satisfied with it, obviously, but I also say it's been a pretty incredible career. You're still a young man, whether you like it or not. 41 is not old, so you've got a lot of golf in you. But let me say something. I'm going to call you a name here, if you're okay with that.
Oh yeah.
I think you're one of the world's greatest golf nerds. You are a golf nerd extraordinaire. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, sadly, you're right. I know. I just love golf, and I love all the parts of it too. So from the golf swing to short game to equipment to exercise and fitness for golf. How to find that. Is it a 0.5% advantage or edge, if you will? And then, as I've gotten older, it's finding out ways to stay healthy, your longevity. What I've noticed is throughout with the invention of TrackMan and Foresight Quad, AMM, gears, all of this stuff and technology, I would say, it's harder to get an advantage over someone else because there's so many good teachers now, because there's so many good, let's call them devices, if you will. So kind of akin to going to a hospital, there's an MRI machine now on every driving range. Okay.
Yeah, there is.
So now the gold lies in, well, how do we change these numbers and how do we affect it and what works best for each individual player? That's also in the fitness world, that's in the equipment world and all that. And so, at 41 years old now, and I love the game. I love it as much as I did when you and I spent so much time together in Stillwater. I still have to find a way to compete with these kids that you're coaching right now. Jordan Bird, Jonathan's brother, I ran into him, for example, a couple weeks ago. I think he's coaching at Clemson now.
Yes.
And he told me he's recruiting a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old, and both of their ball speeds are 120. Club head speeds are 127. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I've done all I can do to keep mine at 120 to 121. And there's a 16-year-old swinging 127. And so trying to now, I'm at that stage trying to figure out all these ways to stay competitive and still get better. It's a challenge, but I think it's what makes the game so great.
Well, I think you're going to be successful as long as you're still a golf nerd, because that makes you love the game and love the challenge of figuring out what you want to do. I am going to point out one thing. I used to bring the Oklahoma State golf team to Isleworth to play in a tournament, and you lived out there. And so we went over to your house a couple of different times for dinner. I'm going to make this statement. You asked more questions of my players than they asked of you.
Yes.
So, do you remember? That's just your nature. You want to find out and learn. I love that about you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I still do. And I ask these kids that come out, I ask them all kinds of questions because, a few reasons. Number one, I just love the game and I love all the different components about the game. But I also want to know, so what are you doing, or how are things changing, or how are things sort of morphing? If you watch and pay attention, Phil Mickelson is brilliant at this. When a new kid comes out, Phil goes and plays practice rounds with him. It's kind of the one thing that's also kept Phil young, if you will. It's what's the next generation and what are they doing and what are they focusing on? And so where I can see what other guys on the tour are doing, et cetera, and I think it matters and it's important. It's almost more important, what are you doing as the head golf coach at Baylor? What's Alan Bratton doing at Oklahoma State? What's this next generation doing and where's this game headed? Because you guys are truly the grassroots of it that are changing everything. The PGA Tour or European Tour, whatever, it just sees the finished product. But you are the guys that are actually in the trenches changing and moving these things around. And so, that's one thing I ask these guys all the time, what they're doing and how they're going about it.
Well, that's amazing. You touched briefly on swing instruction, and I'm going to say this. I've seen a lot of really good players come through college golf, and I've watched them play the PGA Tour and everything. I think you've done as good a job at handling swing instruction of any player I've ever seen. Now, make sense of that for me, because I'm not saying that you're a swing junkie, but I am saying that when somebody throws something at you technique-wise, you find out if you can make it your own. Describe that for me.
So I think it started, I think, because of my father being a surgeon, in that in his world, if a patient comes in the hospital, there's something wrong with them. So we got to find out what's wrong with them and then how to fix it. So then it becomes, well, what do we do about it? And from a very young age, my dad took me to work with a golf machine instructor in Atlanta, George Kellenhofer, and then David Ledbetter down in Orlando, Florida. And so from literally the time I could hold a golf club, I was getting a golf lesson. So I think I got used to instruction from a very young age, where this isn't just a hit it and whatever, we're going to figure out, okay, how does this swing work? How do you put it together? And then the next level is when you're on the golf course, how do you decipher what's happening and how do you go about adjusting it and changing it? So I've always been intrigued by how the machine works. Now, what that's evolved to is, how can I make it mine? So one of the best lessons in the instruction I've learned is, when someone is speaking to you about the golf swing, it's only words, and words can mean anything. So if I tell you, for example, to feel one thing halfway back, and the same guy tells me to feel the same thing, you and I are both going to interpret that and feel something differently. So where I've struggled in the past, which I think this is the struggle of golf, is how do we make these feels our own? And then how do we truly understand what the instructor is trying to get us to feel and do? So it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of hitting golf balls, which is hence, and I know you love hitting range balls as well. I think it's why you do it. It isn't just working on one thing. It's working through multiple things and feels and making it your own. Another thing on the line of that, when Tiger used to live here at Isleworth, where I live in Orlando, we'd spend a lot of time together. And at the time, Tiger was working with Butch Harmon. Well, Butch lives in Las Vegas, and I was working at the time with David Ledbetter, who lives right here in Orlando. Well, I would see David, 4 to 5 times a week for golf lessons. Tiger, who was beating my doors in, would see Butch once every 3 weeks. And he finally said to me one day, he says, "Charles, you're getting too many golf lessons." I was like, "How can I get too many? I got to get better." He's like, "Well, no, you're not allowing the time in there for you to be alone with it to figure out what works and what doesn't work and what you can or can't change before you see him again. So I actually think you would be better off seeing him less." And then kind of a light bulb went off of, what he's right. I somehow have to take this from the golf instructor swing to actually my swing, and what do I know and I feel, and he was a big influence in that piece of it.
Well, that's great. And that's another thing the great thing about our sport is competitors. I mean, trying to beat each other's brains in, and he gave you probably some really amazing advice right there. That's unique to our sport, I think.
No, it is, right. And so you look at across the driving range today at a tour event. And I'm quite sure college is the same. I don't know, but I haven't seen it. But you have, TrackMan's behind almost everybody. Then you have a swing coach probably behind every third guy. Then there's a short game instructor probably involved. And, there's so much information, but it's all meaningless and worthless if the player can't take that and make it his own. Because what really matters is when the tee goes in the ground on Thursday, what you shoot, right? So a lot of times in modern day instruction, we've all forgotten that we have to tee off on Thursday. So, let's make the least invasive changes we can, because the player still has to tee off on Thursday and he still has to make a score. If there's one thing I could be, quote, critical of the modern day teaching industry, it's that. All this stuff, all this minutia, we can argue about P1, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't matter. We can argue about forces and torques and pressure plates and everything. It's got to lead to a lower score, because that's ultimately what we're all judged by.
Gosh, I love that. And I've been a proponent of that for a long, long time. I think that's the only part about the swing instruction industry or profession that needs tweaking, is that when we become too focused on the technique and forget, I got to play golf. I have to play. So, but
yes,
go ahead.
Go. Well, but that's it, right? Like I would rather take a kid and let's make him a better golfer instead of making him a better golf swinger.
I love that. That's another thing. You've long been considered really kind of one of the better ball strikers on the PGA Tour. I don't know if you take a little bit of pride in that, especially since a lot of your peers have voted you that through the years. I mean, how big a deal is that to you? And I know you want lower scores first, but you're a really great ball striker.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's been one thing. I trust me. I realize the difficulty of this game as much as anyone, and the way that the game is changing, and it's definitely, if I could go back maybe on that, I would say I would spend more time on driver and hitting it as obviously as far and straight as I can. And then I would spend more time from 130 yards and in. The way that the game is changing and going, like those two aspects on the far ends of the spectrum, if you will, I've been guilty of hitting way too many 5-irons on the driving range. And then you go play a golf tournament, you think, man, I only hit 3 5-irons all week, but yet I'm hitting a whole lot of putts and chips and a whole lot of drivers, it's only these things that you kind of see looking back, but the game is really shifting that way. And I think if I were in college again today, my practice would probably be a little bit different, today than it was, back many years ago.
Well, and so you're evolving. You're still evolving at 41. That's part of that golf nerd nature. But let's talk about evolving relative to working out, because I have this image of 135-pound Charles Howell with braces, bench pressing 3 times, 225 pounds over his head, okay?
Yes.
Over his chest. So I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. So you don't do all of that same thing today, but if we can take the 23 years between the time you were a freshman and now at age 41, you've been one of the healthiest pro golfers, in my opinion, that's played during that time. That's been part of your consistency. How have you stayed so healthy?
Well, knock on wood, thank you. So when I went to Oklahoma State, I'd been I'd been around the idea of working out and weightlifting a little bit, but nowhere near to the level that you and Coach Holder did. So I'll never forget, we're on that very first day, my freshman year, at 6 a.m. in that dungeon we used to work out in.
Oh, wow.
And I know you remember it. And so I'm down there and I'm nervous, and this is our first workout. I've got on an Oklahoma State shirt, Oklahoma State shorts, Oklahoma State socks. I just think it was the full gear. And I remember Bo looked over at me, Van Pelt, and said, "Wow, Charles, go Pokes." I thought, oh no, what have I gotten into? And but so I think a lot of our time in college was built around building strength, which is probably appropriate when you look at the age of the person, their ability to recover, their ability to, at the time you're playing a relatively full tournament schedule, but nowhere near what professional golf is. And so I'd say building strength through those college years is probably the right thing to do. Then as I've gotten older, I've found other trainers to help me more. It's like, okay, I'm 41 years old now. My strength levels are what they are, and it's important, but let's figure out how to play till I'm 50. And most importantly, let's try to figure out a way to do that without going, under the knife with a surgery. So I think my workouts have evolved a little more from, let's say, a big focus on strength to a focus on power on one realm of it, and the other realm sort of endurance and mobility. And so those are things, but you only learn those in time, because if I were to tell your 19-year-old kid to focus on his mobility and stability, he would look at me like I was crazy. And I get it, because he can go kill himself in the gym today and he's going to feel great in the morning. Well, if you and I do that, we're going to have a hard time playing golf the next couple of days. So there's a certain amount of age recognition that needs to happen in one's mind and acceptance of that. And I think that's made a big difference. And now the factor on the other side is you see what Bryson has done, DeChambeau, and you go on the range, you watch Rory McIlroy hit a driver or Dustin Johnson hit a driver. You're like, holy cow, I've got to keep pushing the envelope on this. So I would say it's get more creative on ways to maintain and pick up speed, other than maybe something in the gym that could be a little bit overdone. Right.
Yeah. The game's changed. There's not a lot of guys, David Edwards, Jeff Sluman, Corey Pavin. There's not a lot of guys like that coming into the game of pro golf anymore. It's mostly the bigger, stronger guys. So that's kind of the way it is. Question, how long do you think you'll play golf? You think you'll play until, just forever?
Well, I want to play the Champions Tour for sure. Okay. I can't imagine what else I would get up to do. And I think, everybody needs a reason to wake up, right? But I still love the game. My son Chase, he's 8, and he loves it. The poor kid, not only does he look like me, he now acts like me. So he plays golf literally from the moment he's out of school till dark. We play, and then we play all weekend. And so, that's kind of given me a bit of a shot in the arm, if you will, because now like I use him, like I'm trying to help him, I'm trying to coach him, but then like he's also like giving me motivation to play and to work, and it's kind of nice having that role a little bit too.
Well, people think of you as this golf machine, and that's what we've been talking about here for an hour. But you're a dad and a husband. Talk about your family. How great has that been? Because you came to college, really had never dated a girl before you got to college.
Oh, no.
You met an Oklahoma girl named Heather, and the rest is history.
The rest is history, right? So I'm lucky enough to marry a girl from Oklahoma, for all those that are from Oklahoma. But, well, first off, I mean, all success is meaningless if there's no one to share it with. And, we've been fortunate where, we've been able to travel the world and do so many neat and cool things for the game of golf, but have done them together as a family. We've taken our kids around the world, literally throughout, even last year, throughout Asia and in a bunch of different countries over there. And so like the life experience that they're getting, but they're also sort of sharing in this golf journey with me, which is awesome. And, with that said, I'd love to keep playing. I mean, my challenge going forward is what everybody faces at this age is how do you balance it all out, right? Where, the daddy-daughter dance goes on the schedule first before the golf tournaments.
Okay.
And there's a few things that take priority, and that's how it's supposed to be. And so, listen, my goal, to answer your earlier question, I want to keep playing, and it's up to me to manage and balance that schedule out, because I love my family and they've, been there and shared in this and a big part of it. So we'll all kind of figure it out. It's, everybody sort of goes through it, if you will, but sharing in the success of it makes it awfully fun.
That's great to hear. A lot of people say, how does a guy keep the energy to keep doing what you're doing? But you have such incredible enthusiasm. I've always appreciated that about you. I think it's the 15th golf club in your bag, just the love and enthusiasm you have for the game. Keep that. Don't lose that ever. But you mentioned earlier that you had spent a lot of time with Tiger Woods in the early 2000s when he lived at Isleworth as well.
Yes.
So I want your favorite Tiger Woods story, if you've got one.
Oh, yeah. So, well, okay, first off, like the blanket statement, we all know that he's great. We all know that he's good. But from spending all the time I spent around him in a practice mode and practice environment, I don't even think people know how good he really was at the time. I mean, he's obviously so great today, but it was awfully impressive. And so one of my best stories with him is, and this lends to his competitive nature, we're playing the President's Cup in 2007 together at Royal Montreal in Canada. And at the time, I'd had a really good start to that year. I'd won at Riviera earlier that fall. And at the time, the President's Cup, I was playing okay. And then Tiger's game coming to the President's Cup, it was kind of okay as well. And so Tiger said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to play every match this week with you as a team." And I'm like, "Oh, great. Like, I can't even hide on this." And so first out, the first morning, we're playing alternate shot. And we're playing against KJ Choi and Nick O'Hearn. Well, I don't know what it is about Nick O'Hearn match play and Tiger, but it brings out the best in the guy.
The only guy to ever beat Tiger twice in the match play, isn't he?
Exactly. Yeah. So these guys are playing great. So we're battling and fighting, and we get to the 17th hole, and I did a nice drive up there, and Tiger's hit this 8-iron to about 15 feet right of the flag, and we've got this putt to win the match. And we've got this 15-footer, and I get back and I read the putt, and I say, I think it's left edge, and I've got to hit this putt. Tiger looks at it, and he's kind of got that smile on his face, that smirk. He says, "You see left edge?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "It's just outside the right."
Oh my gosh.
I was like, "Tiger, I don't see that." He goes, "No, through the middle, through the this and that, the other." And I'm looking at it. And I'm not the putter that Tiger Woods is. I'm not a bad putter, but I'm not Tiger Woods. Okay. And so we kind of came back and forth. Our caddies are involved, and Stevie's there, and Stevie's kind of laughing. And I'm like, "Oh, this ain't funny because I got to putt this thing. I don't want to lose." So Tiger finally looks at me, he says, "Listen, I'm used to winning. You're not. Hit the putt where I said." Like, wow. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. So like I'm completely giving up on making this putt. And I hit it, and sure, this thing goes boom, boom, right in the middle. And instead of saying good putt or anything, he just looks at me and says, "Thank you." I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, but now from the nerd point of view, I mean, I won't know, how did you read that putt? And I would say from all this time we spent together, his green reading ability is phenomenal. I mean, you can talk about putting strokes all you want and whatever. I mean, literally the putter's moving extremely slow, and most players can start a ball kind of where they're looking, but green reading is so undervalued. This guy's green reading ability is phenomenal. I mean, you don't make near the putts that he's made without the ability to do that. But in his Tiger-ish way to saying, I'm used to winning, you're not, hit it where I said, I'm like, yes, sir, I'll do it.
Well, it was good advice, wasn't it?
Exactly. It went right in the middle and won the match.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for telling that story. I know you've probably got 100 stories, but we'll move on. A couple things. One, the whole world, all of us are right in the middle right now as we're doing this talk today of a pandemic, which we've never experienced before. So if you could describe a little bit pro golf during this time, and then maybe just tell me what you think your schedule will look like this year coming up.
Well, so obviously, everybody is, lost and suffered, and, that through this. I mean, this has impacted everybody. And the fact that we're even playing pro golf and have been now since the end of June is a miracle. And a ton of work has gone in from the PGA Tour, the player directors, et cetera. And so, I mean, essentially our system has been a lot of testing, and that involves like pre-testing at home and then testing once on site. But it's been a collective effort of all the players to try to stay as healthy as possible so we can keep moving on, because, where the NBA here in Orlando, we'd say probably is a true bubble, we're still traveling, we're still moving around in hotels and dinner. And so we've seen guys do a great job. And now it's it's a shame that we're playing, without fans, without corporate hospitality, without pro-ams. So, financially, I mean, we take a hit, and sadly, some charities aren't getting the benefits that they were in normal times, and hopefully will again. So I'm glad that we're playing. I'm glad there's a product on TV. Hopefully it's showcasing, the links that we're all going to get sports back. And, with that said, I mean, I hopefully fans are ready to come back, and I'm ready to bring fans back. And, we're outdoors. We're on a 400-acre field, give or take. And social distancing and outdoor transmission, I think it's very possible and feasible to do. So I'm on the side. If someone wants to come to a golf tournament, let's come to a golf tournament. And so, with that said, going into the fall, I'll play the U.S. Open next week at Winged Foot, which is, is going to be brutal. I think they saw what happened in Chicago at Olympia Fields and said, well, if the PGA Tour did that, watch what we're going to do. And then I'll play the week after in the Dominican Republic at Punta Cana, which will now be a full, FedEx Point event. And then we'll have coming up the events in Las Vegas. So the CJ Cup that was in Korea and Zozo in Japan are moving to the U.S. So they'll be in Las Vegas and in California. And then come back to a Masters in November, which, I mean, growing up there, it can be cold in November. And that golf course can play awfully long. So I think people are in for a different looking Masters than the warm sunshine of April. If we get a cold snap, that place could play really difficult.
Sort of like Zach Johnson when he won it, when it was cold that year.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. I mean, you will see less guys knocking on these par 5s and 2. The added length will really come into play. And I think for, from a fan's point of view, I mean, it's sad the reasons we had to move it to November, but they're going to see a whole different Augusta National.
That's great. That's great. Well, Charles, I have one other thing I want to do before we finish up here. But the first thing I want to do is say thanks for coming on today. You've been an amazingly great guest today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I love it.
Yeah. But we're going to end with a speed round. So I'm going to throw some things at you, and you can stop and explain a couple if you want, but otherwise just answer as you will. And then if you have a speed round for me after that, fine, either way. But here you go. You ready?
Perfect.
Favorite golf course you've ever played?
Augusta National.
Thank you. Biggest thrill in the game of golf?
My first Masters in 2002. The whole experience, but the first tee shot. That's the most nervous / excited I've ever been.
Perfect. Any superstitions on the golf course in competition? Superstitions?
Yes, I won't play a number 2 ball. I don't even know how it started, but I just won't do it. So I play 2s in all the practice rounds, and tournament rounds I play 1, 3s, and 4s.
Perfect. Typical practice round playing partners. I mean, just who are they normally?
So here recently over the last year or so, Victor Hovland. Love being around him. He's got a ton of energy. He's excited to play, and he hits it great. So prior to that, a lot with Bo Van Pelt. When I could get Bo out of bed early enough, he didn't like to get up early. And then Carl Peterson. So has also been another really good friend.
That's great. All right, all-time dream foursome. You and 3 others. Who's it going to be?
Bobby Jones, with his ties and history to Georgia and Augusta. Byron Nelson, I would just love to get in his head about when he was winning all those events in a row, et cetera. And then, man, I got to think this is a tough one, the last one. You know what? I'll throw Mike Holder in there, actually, because because I absolutely love being around him and picking his brain about golf. I think if you get past the layer of he was a hard and difficult coach, I think his knowledge of the game was a lot bigger than people give him credit for. He was one of the first people to tell me that he thought one of, if not the best golf instructor was Mac O'Grady. And the more I'm around and go through the game, I'm seeing that to be true.
Great. Yeah, that's a good foursome right there. Favorite spectator sport?
Favorite spectator sport? College football.
Perfect. That's mine. Favorite pro sports team?
Man, this is a hard one now. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it's not because of Tom Brady. It's been well before that. It looks bandwagony now. It wasn't a few years ago, I promise.
Okay, I trust you. All right, a couple music questions. Tupac or Eminem?
Oh, Tupac.
Okay, George Jones or George Strait?
Oh, George Strait.
Perfect. All right, your favorite Coach McGraw quirk? Something strange about me that you're going, okay, I think about that a lot. That's the guy.
Well, okay, so not necessarily a quirk, but the most impressive. Well, 2 things actually struck me. So the more fun one first is how much and how fast you can eat a plate of food.
Perfect.
That was definitely eye-opening and legendary, and not so much how fast, but how much you could eat. Now, but the most impressive that I still tell people about and all that is your golf swing. I thought was awesome. I could definitely tell Ben Hogan was one of your heroes, and you did a lot of things around and after him, but your consistency and your work ethic. So, you would be in the gym every morning at 6 a.m. You would be on the range when you said you would be there. And I always remember, as a role model and an influence is where if Coach McGraw said he was going to be somewhere at 10 o'clock, he was there at 9:45, and he was there ready to go. It wasn't disheveled. And I just remember your consistency, your work ethic, your this, your that. I mean, you were the same person day in, day out. And as a college kid, that kind of feels at times that as a fish out of water, that meant a lot, that consistency.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Well, Charles, this has been great. I appreciate you doing this. We are really looking forward to watching you continue to compete. I think you're going to win in your 40s. I really believe it. I know you've won recently at age 40, but I think you're going to win again in your 40s. I believe it.
Well, Coach, thank you, and best of luck to you guys, and hopefully we'll see each other fairly soon.
All right. Thanks so much, Charles. We'll see you. Thank you again to Charles Howell for coming on the Better Than I Found It podcast today. Really, really special for me. I have a great relationship with Charles. It's one that's been built over almost 25 years, and he's really, really special, and I pull for Charles every single week he plays. In fact, I'm really pulling for him this week in the U.S. Open at Winged Foot. So best of luck, Charles, and thanks again for coming on the podcast.